If you're serious about your business, you need to build systems. And you have to find a great tool like money.com to do it. So my
r/ask Reddit. Medical professionals at Reddit. What is the craziest DIY treatment you've seen a patient attempt? Anesthesiologist here. We had a patient come in for IND of bilateral deltoid abscesses. He apparently had thoughts of being a bodybuilder, but instead of lifting weights or knowing someone who could hook him up with some quality steroids, he decided to bulk up by using some protein powder at GNC and mixing it with water, drawing it up into a syringe, and injecting 20-40 cc daily directly into the muscle. If bulk was what he was going for, it definitely worked. Temporarily, a rip-roaring localized infection makes you look plenty swole. They got almost a liter of pus mixed with liquefied protein powder out of each deltoid. This also wasn't the first time he'd been in for this problem. My dad had an abscess on his face. It was huge, about the size of a golf ball and horribly red. It kept getting bigger. My mom, a nurse, kept telling him to go to the doctor, but my dad was a ridiculous cheap ass. One day when she was gone, we noticed that a big white head had formed on the abscess, and it was apparently ready to bust. My dad went out to the garage, got his shop vac, placed it over the white head, and proceeded to suck out the abscess. It worked surprisingly well and healed up after that nicely. Mom was still furious, though. Paramedic here. Once had to explain to a family that putting lemon juice in the eyes of an unconscious patient isn't an approved treatment method. And no, it didn't work. It was an interesting moment when I had to explain why his eyes hurt. If I've learned anything from reading the comments here, it's that some men will tolerate almost any amount of pain to avoid a doctor seeing whatever stupid shit they've done to themselves. This is no exception. I once spoke to a paramedic who went out to a man at 2 AM who had excruciating pain down below. The poor organ was wrapped tightly in soaking bandages, and underneath was a blackened penis with large pus-filled holes in it. The man eventually admitted that he shoved a chicken bone, a clean one, whatever that means, down his cock for pleasure. Predictably enough, he couldn't get it out, and being too embarrassed to go to the doctor, he left it until he was in so much pain he couldn't walk. Both from the rotted penis and the fact he hadn't been able to urinate for days. Apparently you could actually see the bone once the wound was clean. And although not an expert, my friend couldn't imagine that what was left was salvageable. I had a guy come in for coughing and shortness of breath for the past few months. His lungs sounded like absolute shit. Got a chest x-ray that looked horrible, so I did a CT scan. Radiologist called it the worst case of necrotizing pneumonia he'd ever seen. Dude had like a 15% functional lung tissue left. The patient then mentioned things had been worse after he started using a new breath freshener spray. He whipped out one of those blunt effects concentrated air freshener bottles, supposed to cover up weed smell, labeled not for internal use. Apparently he had been using it like Binaca spray, and had already gone through 3 bottles. In nursing school, while I was on clinical rotation in urology, there was a man who ended up having his penis removed. It turned out he had an infection brewing for quite a while and thought the best course of action was placing a sock over his penis in hope that it would heal. He was generally confused and upset as to why this didn't work to heal the issue. One of my first clinic patients was a dude who was injecting a mixture of testosterone, human growth hormone, sesame oil, and sunflower oil into the base of his penis as a DIY penile enlargement therapy. Well, it got infected, so he ended up going to the ED for incision and drainage. I saw him as a post-ED visit, and at that time, he figured that he shouldn't be injecting into his penis while it was healing. So instead, he was injecting his oil plus sketchy hormones off the internet concoction everywhere else into his body, arms, legs, butt, shoulders, etc. because he figured it would still have some effect. There's a myth that lowering someone's core temperature will save them from an opiate overdose. As a result, many first responders have arrived on scenes to find friends, fellow users inserting ice into someone's rectum. Sometimes they don't have ice around though, which leads to getting inventive. Popsicles, frozen hot dogs, my personal favorite, which regrettably I didn't witness myself. It was told to me by another medic, was a bag of frozen French fries. Cold will do nothing to help someone who is overdosing on heroin or other opiates. What they need is respiratory support, oxygen and or artificial ventilation, and naloxone, Narcan. If you're a user or know one, and somebody ODs, call 911. Perform mouth to mouth and give Narcan if you have it, but leave the popsicles in the freezer. I work in dental and years ago had a patient attempt to superglue her front tooth back on after it broke in half. She screwed up and ended up gluing the chunk to her upper lip. This happened when I was still a med student doing a rotation in the ED. Patient comes in and is pretty vague about his actual complaint. Something about head pain, but he looks just fine sitting waiting to be seen. When I finally get to see him and ask him what actually happened, he removes the hat he was wearing and a chunk of skin about the size of my hand literally flaps off of his skull. This guy managed to basically scalp himself, and apparently it had been like that for 3 days. According to him, it was caused by falling in his bathroom and hitting his head on the toilet. He had been previously duct taping it down or using the hat to hold the skin on, but it wasn't sticking well, and that's when his wife convinced him to come to the hospital. Pharmacist here. Worked in a shop where a woman asked for some advice about potential UTI or STI. Told me she had bathed her vagina in bleach for 5 minutes to try and kill any bacteria. Miraculously, she hadn't done any lasting damage. A 50-year-old man swallowed a chicken bone while eating, and it got stuck down his throat, upper esophagus, unable to take it out with his fingers or coughing. He got a fisher hook with a line and tried to rescue the bone with it. He ended in an emergency department with both the bone and the hook in his esophagus. Edit to add some info. Both objects had to be extracted endoscopically, and then the patient recovered after receiving antibiotics in the hospital. Perforation of the esophagus causes mediastinitis, infection of the space between the lungs, which carries high mortality. An old lady told me the rain hurt her arthritis. That's reasonable. She also swore that dogs spit had healing properties, so she let her dogs lick her feet when she felt it coming on. She then wanted to show me a video of said dogs licking said feet. I swiftly and politely declined. Adult patient had gas and poked a hole in his belly button with basically a knitting needle to release it. Edit. It didn't work. He actually came in for the ensuing infection in his belly button. I work in oncology pharmacy. I had a patient die of totally treatable breast cancer because they decided to treat it with mistletoe instead of chemo. All because Suzanne Summers did. Yep, the Thighmaster lady. Don't take medical advice from the Thighmaster lady. The most heartbreaking thing I've seen is a desperate husband bring his wife in at death's door. They were young with 2 kids under 10. She'd been diagnosed with breast cancer and didn't like what her oncologist was telling her. Shit's terrifying, to be fair. She then left the UK so all chemosurgery free at point of access, and followed the alternatives practices recommended by some witch doctor in her own country. By the time husband dragged her back, she was too far gone. Had spread to so many organs. Trouble with breathing. Groggy seizures from brain mets. I work in ED. I don't know how oncologists and palliative care teams do what they do. Of all the horrible traumas I've dealt with, this is one of the most upsetting cases I've ever picked up. A little late to this thread, but have a weird one. A patient was told by her doc that she had low magnesium and should consider supplements. Not uncommon. Instead of getting MG supplements, she ate an entire tub of homeopathic volcanic ash and completely destroyed her electrolyte imbalance and ended up in ICU. We admitted her as a pharmaceutical overdose, so poison control automatically follows up with you. It was hard to explain to them. Edit. It was probably naturopathic, not homeopathic. I don't know enough about specific differences. Think of a tub of protein powder, but volcanic ash. Her husband brought it in for the poison control report. You were supposed to mix a scoop in water for the health benefits. She ate the whole tub and had a seizure and wrecked her kidneys. The activated charcoal volcanic ash vomit that was all over her when she came from Emerg was a beach to clean up. A mentally delayed woman came in septic to the ED. Did raise, blood cultures, urine cultures, the works. Finally found this weird image on her pelvis film, and we had Jin come do a pelvic exam. They pulled out this blob with bones in it. Y'all, I swear to God, it was a decomposing frog. She put it in her vagina for safekeeping. She got toxic shock syndrome from a frog. Edit. Just realized that the topic was about DIY treatment, and my story doesn't really match it. I guess there wasn't anything she was trying to fix, except maybe the lack of frogs in her vagina? Not me, but my boss, mother of the child I care for, is a nurse practitioner. I asked her what the worst thing she had witnessed was. She continued on to tell me the story of a man who had stapled his ball sack together and onto his body after slipping with the razor. He had it that way for days, metal holding his poor testicles in place, infected and gross as you would expect, before he came to a professional. Later admitted his ex attempted to castrate him. The balls lived. Dude came to the ED because his leg was swollen. I'm talking, like, twice the size of his other leg. It turned out that his 4th and 5th toes were getting caught on his sock, which, to be fair, sounds super annoying. So he cut them the duck off with scissors, and then it got infected, and he waited, and that's how he lost his entire ducking leg. Long story but, had a young teenager with sickle cell disease who had been in the hospital for around a week already who decided to manage his pain himself. This was a few years ago, but I caught him pretending to take his meds. He would cock his head back and gesture that the pill went into his mouth, but really he either kept it in his hand or threw the pill behind his back and landed somewhere in his bed. He was also quite a talker, which I then assumed was a tactic to try and distract me. I kept seeing his odd behavior and caught him doing this 2-3 times by the middle of the shift, so I was definitely onto him. He had a PICC line, which is essentially a long IV where the tubing goes all the way to your heart, in his left arm, and I noticed that it was quite a bit more swollen compared to his other arm. Sometimes clots can happen in PICC lines, so that was my biggest concern at first, but the line was drawing blood fine, so I know it wasn't clotted off. Told the doc. Then I drew blood from his PICC line and sent it down to the lab for it to be cultured to see if there was any bacteria. Lo and behold, it came back positive for a bacteria that is commonly found in tap water, and usually not a source of infection in infected PICC lines. Fast forward a few hours later, he confessed that with any oral medication, pill form, he can slip by the nurses, he saved for later in order to crush them up himself. Try to dissolve it with sink water in the bathroom, every room had a private bathroom, and inject it in himself via his PICC line. Having once seen a commercial that oatmeal can lower cholesterol, a patient started having chest pains and tried to resolve it with a bowl of oatmeal. We had a guy come in with an abscess on his right thumb. When I asked him what happened to his hand, he told me about his recent deep sea fishing trip and was given the responsibility of cutting the fish with an open wound in his hand. A sliver of fish got in there and became infected as it healed. So this guy gets the bright idea of doing a little DIY wound drainage by grabbing his pocket knife and cutting it open, leading to a greater infection. As a child, I got really bad sunburn. The person looking after me coated my sunburn in baby oil to help it heal, and sent me back out into the sun. I realized when I was older why my mum went nuts. My mom once melted Vicks Vapor Rub into my tea because she thought that would help my cold. It didn't. I know people who would do this, more than one of them. They'd swear by Vicks Vapor Rub, and kind of treated it like a cure-all. Neighbor came over to borrow a chainsaw. I noticed he had a thick bandage around his arm and asked him what happened. He said he fell out of a tree last week and cut his arm. I asked if he got stitches and he said he just wrapped it and his family is praying over it. About 4 days later I seen his wife and she said he was really sick and may have the flu. Come to find out he had septicemia and dying. He died a week later of kidney failure and sepsis. I was getting a kick out of all the stories on here, but this one is just sad. Putting a sex toy up the rectum to better reach another, larger sex toy. I just read the other day about a dude who got a dildo stuck up there and then got the kitchen tongs he was using to extract said dildo stuck up there too. Patient used to get boners in class and it embarrassed him, so he used rubber bands to prevent it. Ended up killing the tissue in his penis and now he needs a catheter for life. A man who'd accidentally sliced his leg open at his workplace. He obviously figured that as surgeons use staples to close wounds, he'd cut out the trip to hospital and DIY with an ordinary desk stapler. Arrived in ED with a pus-filled wound with the odd discolored staple hanging off it some days later. I am not a medical professional, but my father-in-law had severe skin cancer. He basically had an open sore on his back for several years that bled and bled. We never knew about it until one day we saw a pancake-sized crater through his shirt. Went to the hospital finally and they basically said he has cancer throughout his whole body at this point. His response was he thought it was a cut that wouldn't heal and put gauze and Neosporin on it. Edit. Since folks are curious, yes, he is still alive, but they didn't give him much time left. They managed to treat the wound, but the cancer spread into his organs and bones. The sad part is it could have been avoided if he just went to the doctor years prior. But that is unfortunately the common mindset in a lot of older folks. White bread soaked in milk placed on an armpit abscess to draw out the infection. Needed an IND and a couple weeks of IV antibiotics by the time he got to us. Either that or the guy who crashed his motorbike, scraped his leg all to hell, and then decided the best course of action was to self-cauterize it on the tailpipe. When I worked in my colleague had to see a guy with an ear problem. He had something stuck in his ear and had been trying to get it out. This wasn't a new thing. He'd been trying for some time. Turned out, he had completely removed his tympanic membrane, and the bits that were stuck in his ear and that he was trying to pick out with cotton buds and hair clips were his ossicles. Enjoy. Had a patient come into the ER with a makeshift bandage on his shin. He had fallen on rocks while hiking and left a 3-inch long, half-inch deep gash in his leg. I go to pull the bandage off and as I'm peeling it away I notice the skin is completely black and there's dark chunks of fungus falling out of the wound. It looked necrotic, like it had been left alone for a week. I look at this guy like he's crazy as he tells me the wound is only a few hours old. He's pretty proud as he explains that he created a makeshift poultice by chewing up leaves and moss, mixing it with river mud and stuffing it into his leg. That's what all the black mossy stuff was. Hint, don't do this. My grandpa thought a leg discrepancy was causing my back pain, which was causing spasms. He put several pieces of cardboard in my shoes to try to even out my legs, which were already even. He also thinks black beans cure everything. My dad thought those pesky spasms was a pinched nerve, so he would take me to the chiropractor, his girlfriend, to get my neck cracked when it happened. Seizures. People, they were seizures. My stepfather thought he had an boil of some sort on his arm a few years ago, so he did what any middle-aged dad would do. Cut the sucker open and poured hydrogen peroxide on it. Turns out it wasn't a boil but a form of skin cancer. Also turns out that hydrogen peroxide doesn't do much to help with melanoma. After a lot of one-sided discourse he went to the doctor to get it checked and treated. He's now cancer-free. I work in the ER at a trauma center. This guy comes in with his little girl and says that she was bit in the face by the family German Shepherd. I immediately take her back assuming that I need to control bleeding. What I encounter is a little girl with a laceration going all the way from over her left eye crossing her nose and mouth. It is not bleeding whatsoever and it seems to have an odd looking substance inside. So I obviously ask the dad what she got inside it. He responds very proudly with, "Ah yes. I packed the wound with tobacco from my cigarettes and super glue. Left double quotation mark. Poor thing." During third year med school I was on a neonatology rotation. Lots of premature babies or high risk births. We'd get code green paged to us for please come to delivery room as able and code pink paged for please come to delivery room stat. There was a pager that was the standard one that got paged for this. And usually it was whichever of us med students who was on call carrying it. Our job was then to get one of the nurse practitioners and possibly a second nurse and head over with the incubator etc. to take the baby and get her to the NICU. About 6 PM one evening as we're doing handover rounds, that pager goes off with a code pink. Then the NP's personal pager. Then the neonatologist's personal pager. The next 10 minutes are a bit of a scramble and not particularly interesting from the point of view I had, as I was assigned to send pages to additional people and fetch things. But in short, a teenage lady of local Aboriginal descent had come in suffering from very premature labor. I want to say 20 weeks, but could have been 22 or so. She and her ex-boyfriend had recently gotten back together. He had discovered she was pregnant, believing that the baby was not his. He attempted to abort the baby by inserting a bamboo stick and trying to fish it out. She did not want said abortion so he attempted while she was asleep. Baby and mother survived, relationship did not. Later testing showed the baby was indeed his, for those wondering. Dental student here. We had a patient who declined a much needed cleaning, saying he could do it just as well at home with a scalpel. Didn't brush his teeth, but every few weeks he would go at the accumulated plaque and tartar with a scalpel. Same patient also insisted we do a procedure without local anesthetic. He was an amateur boxer and was building up his pain tolerance. Double angle quotation mark. He also told us he smoked 20 blunts a day and only drank Coke. We could tell. One time, when I was in nursing school, I was doing a clinical and a guy came in with penile pain. Long story short, several days prior, he decided he wanted a penile texture implant to help enhance pleasure during intercourse for his lady friend. He and his buddy got drunk, of course, and decided to do it themselves. So they went in his garage and took a box cutter to slice open the skin on the dorsal top side of his penis, made some room between the skin and underlying muscle, and put a small porcelain heart underneath. Then he superglued it shut. To make matters worse, the guy didn't wait for it to heal and decided to take it for a test run. He ended up with a major infection and presented several days later. I unfortunately don't know the outcome. I was just there for the porcelain heart extraction. Can't make this shit up. I've now worked in a surgical trauma ICU as an RN for 2 years, and people never cease to amaze me. Edit. Spelling. Oh, the stories I have even as a student. One particular one that stuck with me was a lady who came into the hospital with back pain. Seeing as A&E is usually packed, back pain isn't considered too high on the list. When she was finally seen, we discovered the source of the pain. She had tried to remove the carcinoma from her back that spanned from her neck to the bottom of the ribs. It had gotten infected, and to top that off, she had decided to use homeopathy to treat her cancer. How she had neglected to mention that or have survived so long still surprises me. Not a doctor, but this seems to fit the question. I recently had an attempted vasectomy where I learned I'm allergic to lidocaine and had to spend some time in the ER as a result. I was talking with the older doc, probably in his 60s and close to retirement. He relayed a story from one of his mentors who was a doctor in a small, rural hospital. This hospital, or clinic, closed down at night for the most part as there wasn't much need for it, and this doc decided that he and his wife had enough kids and decided to give himself a vasectomy. By himself. In the middle of the procedure he passed out, came to a few minutes later, and finished the procedure. I've heard of doctors doing self-surgery in crisis situations, like appendicitis in Antarctica if memory serves, but why would you voluntarily do your own vasectomy? Had a patient come to the ER for a cough. We did a chest x-ray that caught a little something in the abdomen pelvis. Did a pelvic x-ray. Long story short, she stuck a shot glass up her vagina for birth control, left it up there long enough for it to calcify, and we had to surgically remove it. Not at all DIY, but one of my friend's dad back home was a doctor, and he had a patient come in with 5+ snake bites, mostly on his hands and arms. The patient said he got bit by a snake and tried to catch the snake so he could bring it in for the doctor to identify it. Luckily the snake wasn't venomous. Saw the young child, about age 6-7, with a bruised, swollen, crooked forearm. He had fallen on the playground 3 days earlier, and another parent there was a vet and had horse x-ray equipment in his truck. That parent took x-rays and told mom he was probably fine. So that was apparently good enough for mom, and she didn't do anything for 3 days while he was up all night screaming in pain. Finally she took him into my office and brought me the fuzzy copies of the x-rays, which were useless and impossible to accurately interpret. I got him real x-rays and a nice cast for his broken arm. This patient wasn't one I saw, but my brother worked for a PCP in our hometown. There was a guy who had a rare condition that required bloodletting, but he didn't have the money to afford the treatment as often as he would need it. Like any rational human being, he decided to build an apparatus at home using a shop vac, mason jars, an IV needle and surgical tubing, so he had no issues for a few weeks. Just set the vacuum to pull the blood through the tubing via the needle and drain into the mason jars. No big deal. One day he isn't paying attention and sets the vac to blow instead of pull. Dude switched it off after a few seconds, but he still had a massive air embolism. He's very lucky he didn't die. He just had a major stroke. He goes in for treatment now the last I heard. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. Right. It's free and that's a great price.
Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. Then one day he asked if I could perform surgery on him. Members of the oldest profession, what is the grossest experience you ever had with a client? I declined, but someone on a popular sugar dating site asked if he could be my human garbage disposal. What does that entail? Me getting ready for the day as usual, except he is there instead of the sink or garbage can. His specific requests included brushing my teeth and spitting it out in his mouth and filing my feet over his body. Gotta give him credit for being honest about his likings and putting himself out there. He was very polite when I declined. I hope he found someone and he's out there living his very best garbage disposal life. When I partook of the scene, a gentleman wanted me to insert strange objects. I was okay with inanimate objects, though when he produced a jar of big, black land slugs, I put the speculum back into the drawer and told him that I would not introduce them. He did come back, but he kept to the usual "it has to be dead" rule. Not me, but my ex was an Asian masseuse. She told me some weird stories. She said some men came in and their cum was full-on green, not white-tinged green, but green. She had a regular that would come in, first thing in the day with a case of some soda, I don't remember the kind, and ask her to only drink that for the day. He'd come back that night and she'd pee on him and in his mouth. A sad story she told me, a very rich customer came in, and the madam lined all the girls up for him to choose from. No one wanted to serve him because he was a burn victim and badly disfigured. He chose my friend and she freaked out and refused. He was hurt but didn't force her and left, despite the madam getting really mad and insisting she do it. For a sugar daddy I had in college, he had me wear a diaper and call him daddy, which I didn't mind and became a regular thing for us. One time though he had me poop in it and then give him BJ in a messy diaper. It was pretty gross but paid well. I worked as a stripper for many years. A guy frequently came in and bought private dances, but would ask girls to pee and poop in his mouth. Girls were okay with peeing, but not okay to poo. I was lucky enough to be busy during his visits, so never danced for him, but my friend did. She said she promised him she would poop for a huge tip. As she was in the private room, my coworker and I were waiting on her to come out just out of morbid curiosity to find out how it went. She was upset because she didn't get tipped. Apparently she wasn't able to poop. She said she squatted over him and all that came out was several farts. I've never witnessed such disappointment over not being able to poop. She sounded distressed and said, "I farted and farted but nothing else would come out." When I was in high school, I worked at a convenience store with an ex-stripper. She told me that a guy once paid her several $100s to pull his pubes out with pliers and shove a Q-tip covered in Vicks down his pee hole. There are some weird fetishes out there. A friend of mine used to do over-the-phone talk. If a client wanted to talk about screwing kids, she had to hang up on them. And there were quite a few of those apparently. The thing that made her quit, however, was the guy who loudly ate his own semen over the phone while describing the taste. I used to be a cam model, so my experience is way more tame. A guy paid for a private show, and started to dirty talk me in chat like, "Oh, you're an evil butterfly, I bet I could do XYZ and you'd like it," which whatever his clock was running. But I had to shut it down when he told me he wanted to bring me to a farm and watch me have intercourse with a cow. I could not stop laughing. This was a 100% serious turn-on for him. Not kink shaming, it just really tickled me, and I told him I could not pretend to be hard about. Sincerest apologies. New dirty talk topic please. I had one long-term client that started pretty normal. He eventually introduced me to his massive dildo collection, some of which were as long but thicker than my arm. I would regularly use a strap-on on him and I was so impressed but also scared for his safety due to the size. Even though they were bigger, he still preferred fisting sometimes, and obviously due to his muscular control that would get pretty intense. None of that would have been gross, but I regularly had long sharp acrylic fingernails. He kind of had a thing for putting a hose nozzle into his butt, like a garden hose with a trigger, and turning it on full blast and having me watch as he pushed all the water and whatever else out to clean himself, and once or twice had me do the same. Also public water sports on a boat in front of fishermen or other boaters. Still not very gross to me, but I'm sure some of the people that didn't consent to seeing that would call it gross. Honestly, compared to some of the other posts, this isn't bad at all. I know I've done some other weird fetish stuff, and never found this particular man's requests disturbing. I think the intensity of being there in the moment and how long he liked to do these things was what tipped it over the edge, because when I brought along a sex worker friend, that had also done some fetish things in the past, to join us, she was much more disturbed by it than I thought she was going to be. It was decent money though. I generally don't like to refer to clients as gross, but one time I opened a cam-to-cam session to find an elderly man masturbating anally with what appeared to be a Yankee Candle. I could only see the bottom portion. Really stupid idea, and I closed the window out immediately. I won't co-sign destructive behavior like that. I wish there was less shame around male anal play, because then hopefully fewer people would use unsafe objects. Anyway. Yeah. That. On my psych rotation at the hospital I learned what a Philly sidecar is. Sex into a colostomy hole in your belly where poop is diverted from your colon into a bag hanging off of you after surgery. Imagining such a thing is traumatizing in itself. I read somewhere the story of a nurse who had a lady come in with an heavily infected colostomy hole. They described the smell alone would make doctors puke out their guts and other graphic descriptions. Apparently the husband of the patient kept having sex with the hole without protections and it got infected. They were too embarrassed to go to the hospital and so delayed it until she couldn't bear the pain anymore. One guy asked me to have sex with his dog immediately after I refused to shit in my hands for $50. Also, my mate that worked as a stripper had an infected nipple piercing for 2 months straight because of how gross and manky her clients' hands were. I had a friend, a young gay man who was a prostitute. I'll call him B. B had 2 clients that freaked me out. One would wear tight jeans, lie down on the floor, and have B put on stiletto heels and stomp hard on his penis and balls. The other one was so nasty, he was a weekly date. He'd have B save up his biggest turds over the week, on a plate in the fridge. When the guy arrived, he'd microwave the poo and masturbate with it while B insulted him. It paid okay, but nowhere near enough, in my opinion. One elderly client who was very sweet but had really dry, flaky skin all over his body. To the point that after having sex with him there were skin flakes all over me, the bed, everything. I was grossed out but said nothing, grabbed some coconut oil and gave him a nice massage. He was touched by the extra attention, and it stopped the flaky skin, so all good. I heard a lot of horribly gross stories during my time as an escort, but fortunately that was the worst I ever encountered. Oh, and Indian dudes who eat a traditional diet have this really strong curry taste to their spooge that always used to gross me out for some reason. I like curry well enough, but not secondhand, I guess. I was selling my services for fun, it fantasy of mine when I was 18, gay male. So I walk along a notorious municipal park lane and a car stops. The driver rolls down his window and not knowing what to say I ask him if he is searching for a commercial. Meaning someone who is into that kind of commerce, I felt very professional and all excited. He said, "Sure, but what I want is peculiar." I say no problem. Today I wouldn't dare say something like this, to say the least. Anyway, I jump into his car and in an alleyway he asks me to take off my left shoe and remove my sock. He then proceeds to sniff my toes while furiously masturbating. I understood what he was trying to achieve because I had similar fantasies about particular smells and sneaker fetish. So I let him go at it and then he pays me $60. In 1985 it was a lot. It took like 3 minutes and I said, "Call me back anytime." He never called me back, but when he left I screamed a scream of joy and laughter in the alleyway. I started pooping while a businessman kept trying to shove his pee-pee down my butthole. I kept pooping, and it was like in Dragon Ball Z when the 2 energy beams are meeting at the middle, and their forces are equal and keep fighting. He was pushing the poop in and I was pushing his pee-pee out. It was pretty cool getting that pooping sensation for like 5 minutes straight, but when he pulled his horse pee-pee out, all my poop started spraying out. Oh, I'm not a sex worker, this was for free. A guy wanted me to roleplay as his 6-year-old daughter. He even showed me a picture of her. Creepy as hell. I didn't do it. I did not report him. I knew nothing about him, not even his first name. We're talking about a city of 2 million people. And technically he didn't do anything illegal. And, sorry to destroy the lovely pink bubbly world you live in, let me put it that way, the fact that he came to me and didn't drive 1 hour to our then much poorer neighboring country is a strong indicator that he didn't really want to have sex a child. Once you cross the border there were mothers and fathers there standing on the sides of the main roads offering their preschool-aged children to comparably rich men from my country for sex. In broad daylight for everybody to see. And neither their nor my country's law enforcement gave care, even after a TV documentary on the subject was aired. I've been there many times myself, for cheap shopping, not for sex, and seen it with my own eyes. No, law enforcement would have laughed at me for reporting a guy I know nothing about who wants to do kinky roleplay with a prostitute. Welcome to the real world. It's not nice, but that's how things are. I got a call from a potential client asking me to bring thin pretzel sticks to his house and shove them up his urethra. He called it bungling the boost or something. He had a really nasally voice too. I could tell he was probably a 30-year-old basement dweller. He also wanted me to get a pizza for him to wear as a bra. I was certainly intrigued, but then his friend whispered as creepily as possible into the phone, "Do you do threesomes?" And I hung up right there. I've been a cam girl and I've been a stripper. One of my last days as a stripper I had a man who was spending a lot of money and time on me. And finally asked for a private, so I took him in the back. Did a dance for him, and then he asked me if I would poop on his chest and then gag on his cock till I threw up, and then wanted me to rub the throw up and boob all over him and me and then make out with each other while we're both covered. I declined this because first off, gross. And second, I do not think my boss would be too happy if the club smelled like throw up and poop. But overall I think camming brings me the grossest customers. I have men ask me to pee for them and drink it. Ew, I always say no. I get asked to poop and to fart at least 5 times a day. I do not do these. I've been asked to throw up as well and then eat it. But the number one grossest thing I hate about camming is the pedos. I look very young, a lot younger than I am. I'm 26, but look about 16 to 18. So I'm constantly asked to do age play. Sometimes as young as 3 years old. It disgusts me and they get blocked and reported right away. It honestly made me really depressed and disgusted when I first started camming. I heard a lot of things no one wants to hear. I block customers who request this kind of stuff, so now I have a good customer base and plenty of good regulars that I don't get asked that as much, but every once in a while a new person will come on my website and request it. Not my experience, but a good friend of mine from a NYC university that I attended. My friend was a voluptuous Czech redhead that had a former gig as a dominatrix. Her clients were almost exclusively very generous Wall Street types. She did the routine humiliation and in diapers roleplay. One of her clients though had a different kind of fetish. The doctor, patient type roleplay. It started off with fake injections and stitches, then one day he asked if she could perform surgery on him. She promptly gave up that gig, so she told me. I was a phone sex worker when I was 21, pretended to be 19, fake name, accurate physical description, and the company I worked with sold both fresh and used panties. I only ever sold fresh panties and took tame calls, no violence, no age play, no bestiality, but one night I had to take a kidnapping call from a daily regular everyone hated. I did not want to do it, I had to be basically forced to take it. He refused to continue after about 5 minutes because I didn't sound scared enough. Funny he knocked me for that when I was actually terrified. I had plenty of funny gross calls, but that was the only one that was actually reprehensible. I've also been a sugar baby, but that wasn't gross at all. He was hot as hell and it went well. I knew a prostitute in Hawaii, never obtained her services. Didn't want them. One day when we were having a smoke in an ally, I was a cook, she worked Kuhio Street. She said with a sigh that her least favorite John was wanting her at the end of the night. I asked why that was so bad. What was she to do? She was to keep all of her condoms during her shift that night. Then, dump the cum into her mouth and snowball it into his. It took days to clear my head of what she told me. Not sure if this counts because I'm in the industry, but not a sex worker per se. Working for an adult toy store brings weirdos in. We've had menus hour, illegal to masturbate in, booths with butt plugs so large even the staff was in shock. I caught a black man jerking a penis literally so big he stroked and it looked like he was pushing and pulling a vacuum cleaner. No amount of BBC porn prepared me for that. But the thing that shocked me most were the requests. We're off the side of the highway so we get truckers frequently. I had one ask for bestiality. In a sort of haha just kidding. Unless you have it. Haha sort of way. Had another guy ask for porn that a 16-year-old made millions off of before everyone knew she was 16. Can't remember her name, but he tried to justify it because she didn't look 16. Still tried to argue his way into me admitting he somehow isn't a pedophile. Backed off when I threatened to call the cops because he was asking me for child porn. Then you get some of the more wholesome guys. One reached out and rubbed my head as if I was his grandkid because he was thrilled I found him some hairy bottom girls. He was so nice. It's bizarre because we have a firm no-touch policy with our customers, and some get so creepy. But this guy was just genuinely happy he'd been helped. 10 would help him again even after he tried to hug me. Really the grandpa vibe there, not even a creep vibe. He was super sweet. But vacuum cleaner guy just left an image in my mind I can't get rid of. A bit late to this. I had a long-time regular who got off on coming all over a piece of food, usually a muffin or cake of sorts, and then watch me eat it afterwards. Another favorite of his was bringing in a shot glass and putting some Coca-Cola in it, then coming into that and watching me take the shot. Damn, it was disgusting, but the money was too good to turn down. The girls I worked with would give me so much every time he walked in the door with muffin packet in hand. One guy was into eating his own cum as well as jerking off onto unusual things. This led to me instructing him to jerk off onto a pile of wet cat food and eat it. Nothing like watching a 60-year-old man who's shaped like Oswald Cobblepot eat a can of Friskies covered in jizz off of the floor, while wearing nipple clamps, black dress socks, and a scrotum clamp. Runner-up, had a client who was employed at a religious college. He paid me for a photo of my morning poop nearly every day for 2 years. Also, far too many grown men don't know how to wash their butts and leave poop stains on the bed. People commenting with their experience as a sex worker get awful PMs. Most sex workers know this, but just on the off chance that you haven't posted about it before, you are going to get a lot of BS for a very long time. As any sex worker knows, people who hate sex workers, hate them obsessively and with a burning passion. Nobody just dislikes sex workers. The internet and Reddit can be a very ugly place. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more videos. Click the right box for the sex workers playlist. Let us know in the comments what you think about this profession. And share your own experience as a customer if you have the balls to admit it. The ambulance had vanished entirely. What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or the most unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? Taking the trash out at night, super remote area so I know for a fact we're the only ones around here, getting close to the road and I hear very clearly, "Help me," from a female voice. Even knowing there's such a slim chance of there being another living person around, I still feel like I should look around and check it out in case I wasn't just hearing things and someone actually needs help. Take about 2 steps in the direction I thought I heard it, hear a giggle in the same exact voice, turn around and walk promptly back up the driveway because F that. Anyone who actually needed help wouldn't be laughing, I don't think. I was working on my motorcycle in a dirt lot where I had crashed it trying to do a sick drift, breaking off the clutch lever and the gear shifter. I had brought a wrench set with me and I was using one of them to take off a bolt, when I put it down on the ground to finish unscrewing the bolt with my hand. 2 minutes later I went to pick it back up and it was gone. I ran all around this dirt lot looking for it to no avail. Luckily I had a spare in the car. Fixed the bike and drove back to my apartment to shower as I was filthy. I walked in my room and sitting on my desk was the wrench. I was dumbfounded. I once clocked out of work at 6 p.m., like I always did at the time, and began my hour-long train ride home. After I had found a seat, I went to sleep and woke up just before my station. From the station, it is a short bus journey, 10 to 15 minutes, to reach home. During the entire journey, I didn't use my phone and I don't wear a watch so I didn't really notice the time anywhere. When I reached home, my family surprised me with, "You're home early, everything alright?" I look at the wall clock and it is about to be 6 p.m. I was too shocked to understand what happened. Checked other watches, cell phones etc. And the time is absolutely right. A few days later, the admin emailed us the timesheets for the month, times clocking in and out, and every single days for me was around the same 6 p.m. So it certainly wasn't me having left work earlier. To this date, I haven't figured out how I gained between 60 to 90 minutes that day. I am 100% sure I vividly remember a dog that apparently doesn't exist. When I was 16 we lived on the other side of the province and my uncle had this little Jack Russell named Crew. Crew went missing for several months and then turned up at a humane society over an hour away and we were all shocked this little dog has made it so far. That was almost 20 years ago, and the other day I was talking to my parents and was like, whenever I hear about Jack Russells I think about Crew and that stunt he pulled, and they had no idea what I was talking about. Insisted my uncle had never had such a dog, I must have dreamed it, etc. Honestly, anyone else who would have remembered this dog has been dead for a long time, and I don't even have any pictures of my uncle. I have absolutely no way to prove this dog existed, but I'm sure that he did. 1985. My ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a streetlight, so the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed asleep. I dreamt that I woke up, reached down to pet him, and he turned into a glossy black bivalve oyster thing which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows towards the wall. I asked what's wrong? She said, "What is that shiny black clam thing with the teeth at the end of the bed? Where's the dog?" We had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me a chill. I had just pulled into the parking lot of where I worked and was walking towards the building. It was like 3 in the afternoon, broad daylight. All of a sudden, I heard an ambulance's siren start sounding. Naturally, I looked down the road to try and see the ambulance. I see it approaching and decided to watch it for a bit. It was quickly getting closer, and it was about to pass right by me. However, there was a large SUV waiting to turn out of the parking lot and onto the road, blocking a few meters of the road from my view. The ambulance passed behind the SUV, probably about 50 feet away from me at most, and I vividly remember the siren becoming completely silent in that instant. The ambulance had vanished entirely as it passed behind that SUV. I was so confused. The road did not have many cars on it at the time, and it was broad daylight. I did a triple take and made sure that I didn't just miss it. I had a clear view of the road going both directions, and there was no more ambulance to be seen. No more siren either. I walked up and down the road, trying to find it for a solid minute. But nope, it was gone. I was well rested, not on drugs, and I didn't have a history of hallucinations. It seems dismissible, but I was completely aware of what happened, and I can't explain it to this day. My wife passed away a year ago today. Had some odd things happen, like a couple of old meaningful pictures show up that I swore were in storage. The strangest one was I vacuumed the carpet, and as soon as I was done, a diamond ring was on the ground right where I had just cleaned. It was like she was saying, "Hey, this one is real, don't lose it." I remember driving my car to this intersection in this rural area, and I'm checking both sides because of terrible blind spots. In the corner of my eye, my mother is sitting there and says something like, "It's all clear my way." I look back and she isn't there. My mother had been dead for a few years at this point. This was also in the middle of the day, and I've never had it happen since. Around 12 years old, I was watching Megas XLR on TV. Sitting there, I noticed that the sun just turned off. Like completely. I was real confused, opened the blinds and it was dark. Show was still at the same spot, but the clock on the cable box said it was 5 hours later. My best guess for what happened was that I passed out without realizing it, like those nights where you lay in bed and blink and suddenly it's morning. So I'm guessing I fell asleep sitting up, for exactly enough time to have Cartoon Network play a rerun of the show, get to the exact spot I fell asleep at. It was surreal. My friend Sarah was in a nightclub, drunk off her face, when she got an overwhelming urge to tell a total stranger that her leg hurts. It didn't. All a bit strange, she ignores it, but it doesn't stop, so she walks up to this guy and says, "I know this is crazy, but I've got a huge urge to tell you my leg hurts." "I know that's crazy, again. Sorry." But he bursts into tears. Turns out his dad had just died, and they made a pact before that if there was an afterlife, he would get a message to him saying a totally random phrase, so there could be no mistakes, which they decided was, "I've hurt my leg." I was about 12 years old, and woke up in the middle of the night needing to take a leak. I walked across the hall to the little bathroom, hit the lights, and was about to reach for the toilet when I glanced up and saw a face in the mirror. It was not my face. It was as if someone was on the other side, standing to the right, with their face right next to the glass, staring at me. I only saw it for the briefest moment, but it is seared into my brain. I screamed, and ran out of there to find my dad. Of course, my dad investigated, then calmed me down, or tried to. Eventually we had a prayer session, because I was so freaked out. I must have gone back to sleep. Fast forward to my 30s. I'd forgotten all about the event. One night while visiting, my dad quietly brings it up. "Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror?" It suddenly came back to me in a rush of memory, sending a chill down my spine. "Yeah, I remember." "Well," he said, "I sometimes think about that night." He looked down at the floor, with a serious expression. I saw it too. He went on to describe exactly what I'd seen. We have no idea what that was. When he investigated, he saw it and had a freak out of his own. Apparently the prayer session was as much for his own nerves as mine. I respect him for keeping that tidbit from me till my 30s, but I kinda wish he'd never told me. I had a very important document that I only ever kept in one place. I kept it in the top drawer of a small filing cabinet. I never moved it and would always see it in that drawer whenever I opened it for whatever reason. The day came that I needed it now and I didn't sweat it because I knew exactly where it was. Well, I'd be damned if it wasn't there. Cue panic attack. I tore that filing cabinet up. I removed everything and spread it out, flipped papers over, dug through envelopes, shook everything out, shined a flashlight all through the emptied cabinet in case it was somehow stuck to the sides. I mean, it was not there. I can assure you no one took it or was messing with me. I was so frustrated. I even looked through other parts of my house. But I knew it wouldn't be in any of those places and it wasn't. I was intermittently going back to that dumb filing cabinet. No luck. Super irritated, I searched the rest of the house again and, on my way back downstairs where my filing cabinet was, I called out in frustration, "Okay. Bring it back." I don't know who I thought I was talking to because I was alone, but you guessed it. I found it in the top drawer of my filing cabinet where it should have been in the first place. I was relieved and totally freaked out. So this has always bothered me. I was 13 years old at the time and my dad was a coal miner. He worked third shift, known as the Hood Owl shift, which was midnight to noon. As such he got home around 2 p.m. and slept till around 9, got up, had dinner with us and left for work. My dad was always pretty gruff and constantly yelled at us if my younger brother or I made too much noise and woke him up after getting home from school, which as an adult now I completely understand. So one day I did something to wake him up, I forget what. Anyways, he calls me back to the bedroom and I'm expecting to get a dressing down, but he just looked at me and said, "It's okay. Come over here and give me a hug." What 13-year-old boy wants to hug their dad? I kinda squirmed a bit and he followed up with, "What if something happened to me?" And just laid there all grizzled and tired. I didn't hug him. That night there was an accident in the mine. He saved everyone on his crew, including the one person he went back in for. His was the only death, and I'm convinced he knew it was gonna happen. I'll never forget his eyes that day. If someone asks you for a hug, give it to them. I love you, Dad. When the song The Final Countdown was released in the 80s, I already knew it. It was brand new, just released, but I knew the tune and the words and could sing the whole thing beginning to end. I believed for a while that it was a cover version, but it wasn't. Around 12 years ago I had a dark purple 3 Series BMW which I drove to work and parked in the same spot for around 3 years. I sold the car due to mileage and wanting something a little more reliable and purchased a different car. 1 week later, I turn up to work to find my purple BMW parked in my parking spot. I was totally shocked. Turns out that we had a work experience kid start that day, and his dad had dropped him off in my old car that he bought 2 days earlier. What are the chances of that? I've never met this kid or his dad, and yet here was my old car in its space. I think most of the people here have experienced the "something falls down and seemingly disappears" thing, but the exact opposite happened to me a couple of months ago. Basically, me and a bunch of friends were standing in a circle in our school's hallway, when suddenly we heard something fall. We all simultaneously looked at the floor, and there was a small, silver, foreign coin, Swiss I think, just laying there. I picked it up and asked if any of them had dropped it, and they all denied. I looked around and there was nowhere it could have come from, and the hallway was empty, so there was no one who could have thrown it. Later we joked that someone in Switzerland probably dropped it, and is now frantically looking for it. About 2 years ago, I went to collect my husband from the ferry after work. My husband got into the car and as I was driving very slowly out of the car park we both noticed 2 people standing a few meters in front of our car. It looked as though they were strangers, older-looking professionals, both walking to their separate cars in different areas of the car park. The man was reaching into his side bag and the lady was further ahead than the man, with her head turned to the right. I know the exact positions they were in because they were completely frozen on the spot. My husband and I sat there watching the frozen strangers, not saying anything to each other, and then all of a sudden it was like someone pressed play and the 2 strangers just continued on like nothing had happened. My husband and I promised to each other that we would never forget how weird the experience was. I can't remember exactly how long they stayed frozen like that, but it was long enough to freak us both out. Two things. Each was witnessed by at least one other person and both were while driving. Once at a stop sign in a neighborhood. All of these little sparkles started swirling around in midair, roughly 3 to 4 feet off the ground out of nowhere. The group of them were 2 feet wide by 3 to 4 feet tall. It lasted 3 to 5 seconds and then they were gone. No one was around, and when I asked my passenger if he saw it too, he breathed a sigh of relief and said yes. We spoke about it a little more, but there is no reasonable explanation. The second happened when myself and 3 friends were driving down an empty country road. Very straight stretch. A man on a bike appeared. Someone said to watch out for him, so not to hit him, and then he disappeared. Our minds were blown, to say the least. Just poof and he's gone. So, this might be hard to explain. I was probably 12, and lived in a big log cabin. One day while my parents were at work, I got in a fight with my brother, 18, who had some anger issues. He chased me through the house and I ran out one door, around our porch and in through another door. I was going to lock it behind me but didn't have time because he was too close behind me. So, I slammed the door behind me and kept running. When I glanced back to see if he had made it through the door yet, he was banging on the window of said door and yelling for me to unlock it. The door was locked and there was no way he had locked it, because the door could only be locked from the outside with a key, of course, and our parents never gave us keys. There was also no way the door could have accidentally locked when I slammed it behind me, because it needed to be fully turned to lock, and usually required some finagling at the end to make it actually lock. I stood there dumbfounded for a few seconds and then ran to a bathroom and locked myself in there. Definitely feel that saved me that day. After my little brother was murdered the next morning, I was talking with a friend and he mentioned this other dude I went to high school with. His younger brother had died in a car accident a couple weeks before. Later that day I pull out a slip of paper with this other dude's number and name on it from my pants. I vaguely remember running into him a year or so before this at a club where he gave me his number. I swear I had worn and washed these jeans at least a dozen times since I had run into this dude. It still makes no sense how that paper was there and I only found it then. I called the dude and we talked a bunch. It really helped me deal with the situation. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more videos. Click the right box for another Clutch in the Matrix video. And let us know if you believe we live in a simulation. Share your thoughts in the comments. All the UFO sightings throughout history are just humans from the future on a time-traveling safari meant to observe how we were in the past. What conspiracy theory do you believe in the most? I think some memes are started by businesses as a form of free advertising. The recent Duolingo memes got me thinking more about it. Duolingo wasn't a small app at the time, but it became a lot more popular after the fact. There have been other memes revolving around a particular product or brand as well, that make me think this is happening on a strategic level beyond some kid thinking it'd be hella funny to do this or that. Marshmello doesn't actually produce his own music. My biggest piece of evidence is the creator arcade videos. He speaks and navigates Ableton like someone with only a basic knowledge of music production. He does everything number by number. Producers don't do that. You can't just instantly know that sound needs a boost of exactly 1 dB at exactly 1.2 kHz without even listening to the sound first. He randomly pauses every now and then, presumably to be fed lines. And he seems to lack even a basic understanding of music theory, recreating MIDI by randomly clicking in notes with no regard for the key of the song. Someone with the level of skill he demonstrates should not be capable of making radio quality hits. Disney released Frozen, so that it would be the top result when searching Disney Frozen, and not anything about Walt Disney's head being cryogenically frozen in the Disney theme park. I don't know how likely that is, on either count actually. Area 51 is just a front that was allowed to become popular in the public eye, but actually has nothing of value. Not saying aliens in bases exist, just saying Area 51 is allowed to be the popular secret base thing to cover up actual secrets. I am not downplaying what the airmen at 51 do, just saying that what they do now is not likely as top secret as people are led to believe. That our phones are always recording, at least audio, to target advertising of course, but more secret agent things as well. My mother-in-law talking at dinner about how hard it is to train for a marathon now that she is over the age of 55. I get ads all over Reddit and Google that read, over 50 and a runner? Check out this random product. within 4 hours of the conversation. I know there was a bunch of stuff about this, but I think every company denied it. Could be wrong though. Marijuana legalization is being pushed by Big Pharma. Once it's legalized, they will then push for restrictive regulations in the interest of public safety that will force shutdowns of consumer or small grow operations. Those are only allowed now to foster positive sentiment towards legalization. So then it's legal and they have a monopoly. Planned obsolescence, if it's still a conspiracy theory. Why does my phone suddenly develop unseen issues when the new one is released? It's not a coincidence. And who even asked for these tech companies to release a new phone every year? We live in a time where technology is now growing at a rather slower pace compared to the 2000s when there was rapid innovation. It's not like my current phone is getting crappier in 1 year, but wait, it is. Applies to phones, tablets, smartwatches, basically most, rather expensive, internet-connected devices receiving updates. There's a recent increase in realistic space colonization movies to garner interest in space exploration. Because some people at the top know it's needed. It's actually probably so very wealthy people can get funding and support from us average losers so they can abandon the planet as soon as possible, while we suffer all the crap that was most likely caused by them. People at the top don't give a crap about you and I. We can sit on the planet and pay for oxygen as we slowly die from cancer. They want to get off the planet. Male birth control advancements are being squashed by the pharma companies who produce the female contraceptive pill because of all the money the pill generates despite it, causing so many unsavory side effects. Example, Voshulgal. A non-invasive treatment for men that mimic a vasectomy but is completely reversible. It's been around since 2010 but can't get funding. I think it's because it is a once of, maybe more than once depending on number of kids you want, treatment and reversal and not a daily dose, so it is not a constant income. Why fund something that won't give you a steady stream of money, even if it means a healthier society? I am not talking about the male contraceptive pill or a spermicide gel. This is, for lack of better way to explain, an IUD type thing for men, completely different to the male pill that has made mainstream media. It was developed in India and there are online sites for them to get funding through sponsors. This is my tinfoil hat theory, it's not based on meticulous research. That Avril Lavigne died in the mid-2000s and her record label hired someone who looked like her to take over her career. Michael Jordan didn't decide to step away from the NBA to play baseball to honor his dad or anything like that. He got caught gambling and David Stern couldn't allow the league to lose all credibility with its biggest star being suspended for betting on games. He had him take a couple years off instead of publicly punishing him. I've posted this one before, but I think that there are high-level rings of pedophiles and sexual predators specifically so that those above them can keep them under control. We know that there are kingmakers. While the big actors and musicians today are certainly talented, there are plenty of B and C-listers who could be just as big if only they had the backing of a big publisher like Disney, Paramount, etc. Thing is, making a king is expensive. You have to spend a lot of time and money getting the public to care about them before they start to pay you back. And once they're big they don't technically need you anymore. So the kingmakers are naturally going to look for people who are retainable to ensure they get their investment back. They have to, for every king they make dozens of duds. It's an expensive process. Sometimes that's as simple as them being naive. A good legal contract can lock them in for a long time, and often the only way out is to destroy your value so the kingmaker stops caring. Look at Britney Spears' meltdown for example, but if you can't get that then blackmail works just as well. I suspect that for a long time homosexuality was the go-to black mark. That's why it seemed like for so long that the big names were always having gay scandals and the like. It was easy to stage, easy to feed them their vice of choice when they were good, and not illegal, just career suicide, so it was low risk high reward. But of course the downside to making a king is that he gets a good deal of power too and eventually public opinion shifted and it became okay to be gay. Could still destroy some careers. The teen heartthrob loses a lot of his appeal when it turns out he's more interested in his very small male fanbase, but hardly enough to keep them from going solo or jumping to another label. So now they moved on to more shocking and illegal appetites. Harder to spot vulnerable marks and tougher to get them their vice of choice, but if it was easy to make a king everybody would be doing it. Someone who abuses women or children isn't about to cross their handler, they shut up and take their cut. After all, they're still being handsomely rewarded, just not as much as they could be making if they didn't have a publisher leeching out the lion's share of their profits. I don't think this is a huge coordinated conspiracy, mind you. I think that quite a few successful talent managers have discovered that sexual predators are surprisingly easy to manage if you're willing to clean up their messes for them, and that when you're talking about tens of millions of dollars you can suddenly afford high-powered lawyers and firemen who neither ask nor answer questions. But between predators gaining power and promoting like-minded monsters, and managers seeking out predators because they're easy to keep on contract, I think it explains a bit of why there always seems to be at least a few sexual assault scandals going on in movies and music at any given time. All the UFO sightings throughout history are just humans from the future on a time-traveling safari meant to observe how we were in the past. They are supposed to keep out of sight, but because of human and mechanical errors, there have been hiccups with their cloaking which have resulted in being seen. That's why there have always been so many reports of them throughout history, but there has never been an attack. It's just us. Also, the reason why we don't see as many examples of UFOs now even through pretty much everyone has a camera is because people are not that interested in this time period since we already document aspects of human life all the time. PETA is ran by the meat industry to delegitimize vegetarianism and cutting back on meat. This one is more personal but I fully believe it. Long story short, my father-in-law was good friends with a guy who was pretty high up in Boeing. Like, knew some top secret kinda stuff. Well, he ended up quitting as he couldn't take the pressure. He was a very paranoid person, to the point his was a hindrance to his life. Well, a few months after he starts telling my father-in-law that he's being watched and followed and that the government is coming for him. Like I said, insanely paranoid. A few extra details that will be important: he drove a moped as his primary transportation and he was very overweight. Lo and behold, he comes up dead a month or so later. The official story is this: he was riding along when a hitchhiker waved him down. He stopped to pick him up, drove a few miles down the road to a secluded wooded area, pulled off the road, walked into the woods and shot himself. I shouldn't need to explain what's wrong here, but I will anyway. I'm supposed to believe that a guy with crippling paranoia picked up some random hitchhiker and then killed himself. Even if he wasn't paranoid, it's basically impossible for him to fit a small child on his moped with him, let alone a full-grown male adult. No information was ever released about the hitchhiker. No name, no statements to the police, nothing. The Earth is a zoo created by aliens, and UFOs are visitors. In Lilo and Stitch, they said Earth was a wildlife preserve for mosquitoes. While the aliens refer to it as a preserve for mosquitoes, at the end of the movie we're told that it was a lie made up to protect Earth from destruction. There is intelligent life out there, it's just that we're too primitive for any prominent contact with aliens. Aliens choose to not come to Earth because we are lacking in intelligence and technology, and that the conspiracy is that we know this for whatever reason but plead ignorance in suggesting there is life out there. I somewhat subscribe to this idea. Imagine if advanced alien civilizations view and treat us like we do the people of North Sentinel Island. India until recently did a yearly overflight of the island and also sends out helicopters to check up on them after major events like the tsunami, but we take a very hands-off approach since the islanders are so primitive. Who's to say some advanced alien civilization that views us as quaint isn't taking the same approach, and that the UFO sightings aren't basically to us what the Indian government helicopters are to the islanders? I really hope we are in a simulation. Every religion's heaven sounds like a real drag, but I don't want everything to just end. Ideally, one day I'll die, then just wake up in a room, go get a snack or something, then load up another life and go for another spin. Repeat millions or billions of times. That Princess Diana's death was orchestrated by Prince Charles. I just can't wrap my head around the idea that this guy has an affair with Camilla and gets caught. Divorce happens, and even during the divorce and after, she is doing absolutely the best, like just killing it still in her duties, mom duties, the gorgeous revenge velvet dress, the entire world adores her. Then all of a sudden she dies in this car accident due to her driver? You know how many countless times she was driven by someone who was trained and hired specifically for the royal family. Then Prince Charles gets married to Camilla and all is right and well again in the public eye the world gets to see. Federal law enforcement bodies are working with the public and private prison industries to flood the streets with heroin and fentanyl, because they see the impending mass legalization of marijuana, and can't risk that many empty cells. A massive uptick in street opioid use in the past few years, combined with aggressive policies targeting legitimate pain patients, and cutting them off of their medications, as well as restricting doctors' abilities to treat more people with things like Suboxone. It's not Big Pharma. Why would they allow their most popular and abusable medications to be all but banned if they're as big and powerful as everyone thinks? It's not like they're hawking new treatment drugs, and the government is working hard to ban natural alternatives like kratom on top of it. To me, it all points to a concentrated effort to increase drug-related offenses to keep fines and court fees rolling in and cells filled after weed is legal. Amazon tracks people who buy Ring doorbells and then waits for those same people to buy another product. Then they send actors and actresses to deliver the next package. While delivering, the actors are told to do something cute or quirky, dance, smell the flowers on the porch, or pet a dog, so that the owners will hopefully see the footage and post it online to social media and give the impression that working for Amazon is actually fun and exciting. All the while getting free advertisement. Music feuds don't exist. They are created by record labels. Anybody who thinks Taylor Swift and Katy Perry were feuding are morons. It is a marketing stunt. Their record labels create these feuds to sell music. When Taylor fans think Katy does a song about her, they all buy the song to see what she is saying, then buy her album to find more songs that they think are about Taylor, and the exact same thing for Katy fans. They are given generic songs to sing that people just assumed are about the other but in reality aren't about anybody. Same goes for rap feuds. A up-and-coming rapper feuds with a more successful rapper to gain popularity just as that more successful rapper did when they were coming up. All these feuds are just to sell more music. Stoned ape theory is fascinating. The possibility that our conscious thought and self-awareness was developed from monkeys eating mushrooms is so crazy but still plausible. Remember when you were a child and had a life-changing revelation on how the world works? Remember any one of the life revelations that brought you to where you are? All of your thought from that point forth was altered and now on a different path of thinking. Your reality became different and a clearing took place in your mind where you finally understood. An epiphany. This absolutely happens when you take a high enough dose of psilocybin. The theory is that primates discovered shrooms in the wild and it unlocked logic or analytical thinking in their brain, the one thing that most differentiates us. With this newfound logic came a biological shift over millions of years. It would make sense that the split happened sudden and remained divided since humans with logic wouldn't form social bonds with primates like that. They'd stick to their species for survival and easier hunting. That the governments of this world, and other entities mentioned in these things, are double-playing the conspiracy theories and theorists, and not only through stigmas like the tinfoil hat. I believe that, for example, if there is one huge leak by one of these guys, or maybe even by someone like Snowden, not him specifically, but someone in his kind of position or at least someone that won't be instantly deemed a nutjob, it's in fact a decoy. You hear about the mess-ups they can afford to let you hear about, thus keeping everything in a constant state of confusion. Are they really that stupid to have that leaked? Or are they 3 steps ahead? You can never know, and that's the way they want you to be. There's a lot of things that go smoother than silk and nothing ever truly feels like it's changing. It's like, I believe they would have the manpower, the intelligence, and the stakes high enough to pull something like this off. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the bell notification. Share your own favorite conspiracy theory in the comments below and let me know which of the listed theories you like the most.
r/ask Reddit. Stephen Hawking has stated that we should stop trying to contact aliens, as they would likely be hostile to us. What is your position on this issue? I think it depends on how rare life is in the universe. If it's everywhere, they probably wouldn't mind coming to kill or enslave us and take our resources. If it's rare, I feel like they'd be more likely to realize that we are valuable and try to make an alliance. While that certainly could be true, it's dangerous to apply human values, ethics, and feelings to an alien species. Do they care about other life? Do they have an urge to explore and/or communicate? Would they wipe us out because they consider humans too warlike? Would they wipe us out because we are not aggressive enough? Would there even be a they? Would aliens be individuals, a society/culture, or a hive mind? There's a huge amount of unknowns here. And unfortunately, when faced with that many unknowns, paranoia is probably a good policy. I think this is where Hawking's point comes from. The key is how abundant resources are. If water is rare, get ready for extermination. If it is everywhere, they might not bother. Edit. Sorry for picking water as my arbitrary scarce resource. Vespene gas then. We got it. They want it. If things are abundant in the universe, we are probably safe. If something is rare, we are not. Also, you have to factor in how easy extermination might be. If they get a hold of any living cell, they could potentially make a biological weapon that targets carbon DNA based life, making the planet perfect habitable for them, and destroy all of us in a very short time. Such a payload could be delivered in a small rock. We would never know. On the other hand, it could be hard to exterminate us, in which case they would have to have a good reason. Or we could be alone, and interstellar travel is impossible, and we all die and the sun expands. I honestly think that any civilization that has advanced their science to the point of interstellar travel has to be peaceful. I can't think of who said it first, but basically, weapons to destroy the world exist before the science to leave it. So any culture that develops tech but isn't peaceful will destroy themselves before they get interstellar, leaving only the peaceful worlds left. If we encounter aliens, I think they'll be curious about us. Nothing more. But what if they were peaceful, but then ran out of resources and needed something that only we had? What if they were such a different kind of being that they didn't even recognize us as conscious in the same way that we don't recognize ants as conscious, even though they are alive? If this were the case, even a peaceful world may have no qualms about destroying us. There are a lot of assumptions being made with this theory. Edit. Since I've gotten about 35 responses saying the same thing about Earth not having any unique resources, I'll give up on that point. What I'm more interested in anyway is the idea that an advanced civilization that we made contact with may be too advanced to recognize us as having sentient status. In this case, there is no telling what they would decide to do with us. Assuming they would be benevolent toward us simply because they are advanced is, I think, naive. Perhaps they would turn our planet into a science experiment at the cost of billions of lives. If they have the resources to travel between stars, I imagine there isn't any resource they can't create easier than that. The real question is what on Earth could be valuable enough to make them bother to come all the way over here? Probably nothing. Edit. The slave labor responses are comical. A species has mastered interstellar travel and they need day laborers? They cross the galaxy to pick up some less hairy monkeys to wrench on their space cars? We have barely left the solar system and we can build better robots for plenty of specific tasks already. Human beings study every form of life, regardless of value. Name a creature, and there's 24 experts competing to be top dog in the field. I don't know what the value of a dung beetle, but I bet there's a human somewhere who's made it his life work. My point is, it is reasonable to assume that other intelligent life would also have their version of academics and scientists who wish to study less developed societies, etc. I think it's impossible to know if an extraterrestrial being doesn't already have human beings in their possession and in an artificial environment for study. Sometimes I think the surest sign that intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe is that none of it has tried to contact us. Calvin and Hobbes. Heather, I love it. That's my email signature since quite some time. I forgot about non-business email signatures. Listen to the smart person. Seriously though, most first contact situations in our history went poorly for someone. What about the other smart people that disagree with him? Honestly, they romanticize our contact with extraterrestrial life. To pretend, even for a moment, that we should advertise a location and existence to a far more advanced society is asinine. An alien race has legitimately no reason to not exploit us for something, and we have nothing to gain from extraterrestrial contact yet. I think it's one of the dumber things Hawking has said. Not that I think I'm smarter than him, but everyone says stupid shit from time to time. The problem here is that Steve's reasoning doesn't hold up when you apply it on an interstellar scale. His argument is that, since humans aren't historically very kind to the native population of a new land we discover, alien explorers will likely ape, pillage, enslave, and or slaughter us. The reasons for the exploitation of natives, though, don't really apply when you bounce around the planets. The primary one is natural resources and precious metals. But if you have the means to travel between the stars, you don't really have to worry much about resources. Anything you can find here on Earth can probably be found all over the place in the universe, and probably all over planets without any life whatsoever. The only resource they might be looking for, which might not be abundant or easily procured without stepping on other life, would be habitable planets. But it'd be hard to believe that there aren't a ton of Earth-like planets without much in the way of sentient life. Sentient, intelligent life, even within the confines of a system that has life, is incredibly rare. There have been billions of unique species on Earth. Only one has left the planet on its own accord. Additionally, traveling around the galaxy or universe would indicate a species is probably incredibly advanced. They would have to have invested a ton of effort into solving incredibly difficult problems. It seems likely that their drive to explore would be fueled by a quest for knowledge. But the final point, and this sort of undermines previous ones, Hawking is projecting human interests and motivations on a species which would be decidedly not human. There's no telling how they would behave. So saying things like humans aren't kind to native populations while exploring as a way to underpin the idea that we should fear exploring aliens just doesn't follow. Truth is, we have no idea how they would behave. We can speculate all we like. But in the end, hell, maybe they take over Earth and slaughter us simply because human meat is a delicacy in the universe. Or maybe it turns out that our blood is a universal cure for alien cancers. Or maybe they hunt for sport. Or maybe it's the other way around. And maybe they don't visit us because they are completely non-confrontational and see us as being exactly the opposite. Maybe they figured out a way to materialize food from thin air and no longer have to kill to eat. And in fact, have created a society that doesn't kill for any reason at all. I could speculate for hours. But in the end, each speculation is as likely as any other. And there's no reason to fret over any of them. Hawking is projecting human interests and motivations on a species. Humans' interests and motivations were shaped by evolution. We are not so different from other animals on Earth. God ducking knows what alien life is like. Might not even be carbon-based. I don't think we should contact them, because they probably have some next level colds and flus that they are all immune to that would kill us all pandemic style. Sort of like with the Native Americans and smallpox. Not so much. Diseases evolved along with us. Their bugs would be pretty useless in an alien biology. Quite feasible. Either they have some huge Battlefield 2 style unlocks for bugs, or these bugs simply aren't capable of doing anything to our physiology. Your hypothesis seems more feasible, as any organism that can make it to Earth must be fairly evolved, and definitely evolved in a way different to ours. We know that similar conditions would push for evolution to occur in similar ways. See convergent evolution, leading to the development of similar traits. So if there is some organism out there that has bugs that are capable of damaging us, we can assume that these organisms would have conditions similar to ours driving their evolution. This would then depend upon the time scale. If they have had more time than sapiens to evolve, then they would be advanced enough to make it here. Or if they are at a level similar to ours, then they cannot contact us yet. Either way, when we think about it, we realize that even we sapiens have a host of bugs and diseases that could or could not totally destroy an alien species. What stands is that, if there is a meeting between us sapiens and a convergently evolved alien species, we'll call them marsupial sapiens. There is a huge chance that both would cause each other huge casualties due to diseases, even possibly annihilating the specimens that actually wind up meeting. Brady Heron has put it nicely in one of the latest Hello Internet. Say the universe is a city. Science states it should be lit up and alive. Yet everything is dark and there is no noise. Why are all the lights out? Is science wrong? Or is there a good reason you don't want to turn on the lights? Paraphrasing. The problem is, the city is huge and the buildings in it are so far apart we can't tell if any of them are occupied. In fact, we can't even see the other buildings. We only know they are there by indirect means. So this city could be overflowing with life. But we just can't prove it yet. I don't think a lot of people realize that aliens will have no need for our resources. If you can reach the speed required to reach us, you'll be far enough along to produce any material you want. So really the only thing they would want to see us for is either 1. Cultural killings. Meaning it's a part of their culture or ideology to kill other species. Could be a matter of culture, religion, or whichever. Or 2. Peace and humanitarian. We would obviously be the third world country of the galaxy. Knowing that as we are now we can't reach other planets, so the only scenario would be them finding us. And any civilization with those capabilities would be way ahead of us. So knowing that there could be aliens out there spreading knowledge to help suffering from disease, war, famine, etc. Idea number 1 makes me feel like we need a Master Chief. Read this as Master Chef and was utterly confused. I think he's got a valid point. Star Trek represents the best possible outcome, while Alien and Independence Day offer worst case scenarios. In Alien, humanity has expanded well past our own planet and is exploring the universe. In Independence Day, humans are able to destroy the alien attackers and presumably use their technology to advance our own technology so we can go into space and defend ourselves. Neither of those is anywhere near worst case. Worst case is either humanity's chances of successfully escaping this planet in a significant way disappear within 100 years of now, or aliens obliterate us silently by a kinetic strike we never see coming. What I'm getting at here is that none of our movies come even close to addressing just how bad things can actually get. I see this. First act, hundreds of billions of AI bug-sized drones separate from the dropships and insert custom tailored viruses into every living human, animal, plant, plankton, etc. Everything macro dies. Second act, terraforming machines tailor atmosphere for alien home flavor. Third act, bacteria and funguses are allowed to eat biomass of dead flora and fauna for a number of years to eliminate food sources. Third act, bacteriophages are cloud released which wipe out a vast majority living flora on Earth. Bacteria, algae, fungus is included. Fourth act, a waiting period is instituted for all viruses to expire. Fourth act, AI bugs are repurposed to reseed planet with alien flora and fauna, thereby outcompeting any surviving Earth life forms that weren't starved from ecosystem collapse. Fifth act, aliens arrive and leisurely walk to the beach to enjoy their new planet, the 385th of their nation. The way I see it is that there is definitely alien life. Giant universe. There is ducking alien life. Now the question is, have they found us? And if yes, have they either made contact in secret, like conspiracy theories would like us to believe, or have they decided to let us deal with our hit first? Let's face it, we, as a human race, still suck pretty bad. We don't need aliens to deal with, and if they are more advanced, spiritually, socially or whatever the duck they are, most likely they don't want to get involved. Chances are they have bets going on if the Earthlings will kill this planet or not. There really are an infinite possibilities if you consider they are more advanced. And if they are more advanced, technologically, and hostile towards humans for W/E reason, we are pretty ducked anyways. With what we have as weapons we could kill most of the Earth and its inhabitants, and so can they. I personally like to assume that they found us, but are pretty chill guys, and see us a little like we see children. They know they've been there at one point, and it amuses them to see how we deal with our hit. Well, not really how an Earthling relationship with their children is, but more like an observer that goes unnoticed by the children who are very much occupied with, well, whatever the duck we are doing right now. Let's just hope they don't just read the tabloids and we're fine. TL. Dr. Aliens are chill guys that wanna wait till we mature a little more before we are invited for intergalactic drinks and chasm. If they wanted us dead we would be dead already. Considering there could be other hidden dimensions woven in the fabric of space. Aliens could be occupying dimensions past our 4. That could be why the nuclear tests of the 40s and 50s correlated with widespread reports of UFOs. We might have really got their attention. To put another way, I'm certain I live on top of massive ant colonies. I see them on the surface all the time. I don't mess with them, and they generally don't come in my house. If one day they started attacking me, or the house, they would get my undivided attention. My goal would be to exterminate them. Let's hope it doesn't go down this road with us. Op. Have you read the novel The Three-Body Problem? Or even more relevant, The Dark Forest? The first axiom is that survival is a primary need of civilization. Therefore, civilizations will do whatever it takes to ensure their own survival. The second axiom is that civilizations always grow and expand. But the amount of matter and resources in the universe are finite. The universe is a dark forest, where every civilization is a silent hunter. They desperately try to stay undetectable, while hunting for other planets to colonize, and threats to destroy. Ducking, like, and subscribe. r/ask Reddit by Reddit watchers. What is one fact you know that will make other people respond with, and why the FK do you know that? A corpse can have an erection. It is called angel lust or death erection. Die Hard. It takes about 5-6 hours in a boiling lye bath to fully dissolve a body. Less if the pot you're using has a pressure cooker attachment. All you'll be left with is bone shadows, little undissolved bits of calcium that can be crushed, and a pinkish grey slurry that can be neutralized with vinegar so it can be safely dumped. Edit. I learned about this from disposing of deer carcasses. After harvesting the usable meat, we take the offal and bones, pop the joints and chuck them in the pot. Let it go outside for a few hours. Then discreetly dispose of the slurry. Just make sure you don't use an aluminum pot, since lye will react with aluminum, creating aluminum oxide and hydrogen gas. Very flammable, often leading to an explosion from the heat source. Also toxic. Wombats naturally crap out cube-shaped poo. Scientists think it's so they can stack it to mark their territory without it rolling away. Flatworms are dual-gendered and mate by fencing with their penises. The winner is the one that penetrates the other's skin first. Some species have 2 penises. It takes 2-3 days to cremate a body on a standard bonfire. So you're telling me funeral pyres would have taken days to look after? Costco has spent hundreds of millions developing factories just so they can continue to offer their hot dog and soda combo for $1.50 and their rotisserie chicken for $4.99. The chicken farming is a pretty revolutionary endeavor for a grocery company. I read an article about it a couple of weeks ago. The idea is that they control every aspect of how the chickens are raised, and the farmers are given a guaranteed agreed upon price for them. This system has the potential to completely rewrite how major companies source their meats. Many species of sea cucumbers have evolved to have teeth in their anus to ward off potential inhabitants. Can they eat through their anus, or is it just for protection purposes? Sometimes, when horses are bored, they slap their dong to their underside to masturbate. I witnessed a Clydesdale do this at Grant's farm. Absolutely scarring. Rubbing alcohol is a great way to get the smell of smeared poop out of skin. Pigs with a prolapsed anus are at risk of being eaten by other pigs. Same with chickens. They see red and they peck at it till the chicken dies and then usually eat it. Australian box jellyfish have 64 anuses. Finally, enough holes. Broccoli and cauliflower are man-made. It was carefully bred by Italian farmers more than 2,000 years ago, carefully breeding different types of wild cabbage to create it. Brassica, that wild cabbage, was bred into broccoli, cauliflower, kale, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, collard greens, mustard, rapeseed, turnips, rutabaga. About 1 girl out of 100.000 will have the vaginal and anal tracts fused together, meaning that they can in fact get pregnant doing anal. Do women know when they have this condition, or is it not very obvious? Most cruise ships are equipped with a morgue to account for any passengers who died during the voyage. I read somewhere that many old people are actually starting to use cruise ships as assisted living facilities when they can no longer get by on their own. The tickets for a month of cruises are about the same as a month's stay in a facility. There is plenty to do on board to keep them active. Cooking and cleaning is taken care of, and the weather is usually beautiful. You can hang yourself in 3 ways. Rope really short, suffocation, medium length rope, breakneck, really long rope, decapitation. Yep. The British Empire in the 1800s had hangings down to a perfect system. They knew exactly how long to set the rope based off of size and weight of the condemned to achieve the perfect neck break every time. They were also incredibly efficient in the actual process of hanging someone. It took them very little time to do it. Human shit has a distinct smell that's different from other commonly encountered poops. You ever smell pig shit? The most babies born to one woman is 69 in the 1700s. Before kale became a popular health food, the largest consumer of kale was Pizza Hut. They bought it to ring the salad bar. I was working at a grocery store when that kale hype kicked in, and we went in one day from putting it around bowls of peppers to selling it beside the peppers. First lady that asked me for it just floored me. You want to buy the decorations? I'm gonna have to ask me manager. This is something my bio teacher taught me last year. Basically, male barnacles have the longest penis to body ratio, and the penis actually extends out of the barnacle and goes searching around for female barnacles to have sex with. Stop calling Danny DeVito a barnacle. Those tiny fake flowers and little glass vases at the gas station are less about the flowers and more about the glass, which can be used as a crack pipe. There's a small head shop, convenience store, Chinese restaurant, printing shop, ice cream joint down the street from me. And they straight up just have the tubes at the front counter. They know. Regarding the Museum of Mummies. Ferdinand I of Naples governed by oppression. He had zero compassion for his defeated enemies. And after falsely promising them amnesty, he had them murdered instead. After their murders, he would have them mummified and added to his museum of mummies dressed in their clothes. If he thought anyone was plotting against him, he'd simply take them on a casual tour of the museum, which was totally morbid, but effective. I too am hyped about Crusader Kings 3. A bee's testicles explode when they mate. Edit. As many people are pointing this out, I will add that the explosion is loud enough it can be heard. Edit number 2. Their dong is also blown off by the explosion and occasionally gets stuck in the queen. Courtesy of u/Jibitha Mediaca. Edit number 3. Grammar calls Reddit ain't fucking around. Ireland's rail gauge is slightly wider than the international standard. Yet its tram system uses the international standard. Same thing in Spain. That's why you can't take a train between Madrid and Paris without a transfer. The longest recorded piece of poop is 26 feet long. A typical ejaculation consists of 1 calorie. Edit. If you swallow the semen, it will give you 1 calorie. You do not burn 1 calorie. The longest recorded piece of poop is 26 feet long. And how many corex is that? Most birds don't have intermittent reproductive organs, like a penis or vagina, and they share their genes through a hole, called a cloaca, that leads to their inner organs. The act is called a cloacal kiss and is over super fast. Most duck species, however, do have intermittent organs. The penis is shaped like a corkscrew and can be 50% or more of the length of the duck in some species. This is because the vagina is an elaborate maze of twists and turns, creating an evolutionary arms race between the sexes. The longest duck dong award goes to the Argentine lake duck, though he is a mere 15 inches long. His dangling corkscrew is up to 16 inches erect. Now that's gotta produce some drag. Edit. Should be intermittent. Thanks u/M Faustus for pointing that out. Edit 2. People seem to struggle with the why females resist mating. Much like humans, female ducks like to choose the best male to reproduce with. They will make themselves available to the males they prefer, and this mechanism allows them to resist advances from the males they don't deem worthy. Thank you for that amazing info. I'll add duck dongs to the list of things that make me insecure of my penis size. The human body can literally expel feces out of your mouth instead of your ass. I used to know a nurse who had to deal with that once. The guy was constipated so badly that he was shitting out of his mouth, I guess. Anyway, she said it's the worst thing she's ever smelled. Way worse than just straight poop apparently. Vibrators were the 5th domestic electrical device invented. Edit. Saw it in a documentary called Original Sin Sex on Hotstar, if you wanna check it out. Siblings. Or parents and children. that were separated from one another at birth or a very young age are often extremely sexually attracted to one another if
Automating away all our basic autonomy. Basically pay for the fake aristocracy. Shaking the shame and the sickening policy. Saving on sacred and taking my property. Locked out for weed, locked out for poverty. Lots of us locked out for being anomalies. Logging us down if we ain't how we oughta be. How can I help when I ain't even proud of me? Perfect solution, I heard you been losing. Be sure to be nervous, like certainly choosing. He's certainly proving it, curving and cruising through everything. Throwing it, him serving the truth. Ain't but trickle up, hey, gang standing up. Hey, plain Jane's on a bus. Man, John Doe know it's us. Hey, Yang Bucks trickle up. Hey, gang standing up. Hey, plain Jane's on a bus. Man, John Doe know it's us. I just left my school, couldn't find a pot to piss in. Harsh recidivism, need an extra extradition. Imagine giving 10 Benjamins a kiss in my position. That's your decision. It's so pernicious. With your permission, I hope you're listening. I really hope you listen. We're sick and tired, Yang is breaking the silence. Y'all way too pie, accepting what you're provided. Come out of hiding, take them all by surprise. We lost our pride, he's told us where we can find it. Yang Bucks trickle up, hey, Yang gang standing up. Hey, plain Jane's on a bus. Man, John Doe know it's us. Hey, Yang Bucks trickle up. Hey, Yang gang standing up. Hey, plain Jane's on a bus. Man, John Doe know it's us.